Okay. Great. Thank you so much, Tracy. All right. Good morning, everybody. It is this is the Des Moines Area Metropolitan Planning Organization Transportation Technical Committee. Before we call the meeting to order, I do want to pause. We had, if you saw the announcement on April 28th, I did want to reiterate. Todd Ashby is parting ways with our MPO here. And Todd was hired as director in 2011, and so I wanted to thank Todd for all his service to our MPO and wish him the best. He's done an outstanding job. He's built one heck of a great team, and so I wanted to thank him and wish him the best in his future endeavors. In the interim, Dylan Molnix is going to be who's been with the MPO as assistant director since 2014. He'll be the interim director, and so please reach out to Dylan if you have anything or any questions. But again, I wanted to just pause before we start the meeting here and thank Todd for everything he's done and wish him the best. So that brings us to our technical committee meeting. I would like to call this meeting to order, and we'll start off with. I know Tracy had sent the agenda out, and so do I have a motion in a second to approve the agenda, please?
Davis, so moved.
Second.
Thank you so much. Okay. All right. It's been moved and seconded. And again, we are doing the meeting online. So we won't have everyone unmute and say aye. We'll just ask everyone that's opposed to the motion, please speak up. So anyone opposed? Or any discussion, I should say, first. Anyone opposed? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. Okay. And I also know Tracy had sent out the meeting minutes for April 6th. Can I have a motion and a second, please, for approval of the meeting minutes?
So moved, Castor.
Second, Wilverton.
Thanks, Dave. Okay. All right. We got a motion and a second. Any discussion on the minutes, please? Okay. Anyone opposed? All right. Hearing none, that motion passes. Thank you, Tracy, for getting that all together. All right, that brings us to item 4, and we got a presentation today on low salt roadway design. Zach, are you available to are you going to kick this one off?
Yes, I'll provide a brief introduction. So MPO staff had a meeting with Bolton Mink earlier this year, and the topic of low salt design came up. We thought it sounded like something interesting and something that would be of interest to this committee. So we have invited Connie with Bolton Mink to come and present on low salt design. So I'll turn it over to her to introduce herself and to share with us her knowledge on low salt design.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm gonna see how I do sharing my screen here, and then I'll give you a little more. Let's see. Can you see my my cover slide?
Yep. Yes, we can. Thank you.
Well, hot dog. Well, then we're on the right track. So, well, thanks for inviting me. My name is Connie Fortin. I'm a project manager, but really a low salt strategist for Bolton and Mink. Just a little bit about my background is I spent at least 20 years, 25 years probably, working with winter maintenance professionals to try to help them integrate science and strategies into their work to drop down the salt use. And my company was acquired by Bolton and Mink about a year ago. And as I was training all these snowplow operators, they were training me. And they were training me on how our built world does not function well for them in the winter. So now that I work in a sea of civil engineers and landscape architects, I'm trying to get us to design different for winter. And I'm going to share some of what I've been working on with you. Be interested to hear your comments. I can't see the chat while I'm presenting, so if somebody else can keep an eye on it, just let me know. And let's just jump in. So over the course of my career, I've trained over 20,000 snowplow operators and winter maintenance professionals, lots and lots of them. So we were training each other, as it turned out. And I have a handful of their complaints, which I've brought now to our design staff and say, okay, how do we do something different? We can't assume the plow drivers can drop down the salt, right? Unless we do something different in design. So I presented this vision to our company. I said, if we can integrate low salt design into our cold climate designs, we can have safer winter surfaces. We won't need as much salt. If we don't need as much salt, we're going to reduce infrastructure damage. We're going to reduce water pollution, damage to soils, vegetation, wildlife, and we're going to be more in compliance with chloride management plans as they start to sprout up everywhere. So just this image is just so typical, right? You see a warm winter day, we get the melt, we get all this on our surfaces, and what happens at night? We get an ice skating rink and we resalt it. So I'll just talk a little bit about the chloride problem in case you're not familiar, but the federal standard for chloride in lakes, rivers, wetlands is 230 milligrams per liter. And the drinking water standard is 250. So what does that look like? It looks like you take 1 teaspoon of salt, put it in a 5-gallon bucket of water, stir it up, and you're at about that 230 concentration. Chloride is a forever pollutant. Like once you put it on the road, it goes in the water, it stays there and it just accumulates. We're having a really, really difficult time keeping our drinking water and our surface water under 230 and 250. So it is now the top pollutant of concern in Minnesota, chloride. And it should be a very high pollutant of concern in Iowa as well. So here's how you're doing with your lakes and rivers. Okay, if you see a dark blackish dot, that is the lake or river with just about 0 chloride. Okay, 100 years ago, your state map would only have these kind of blackish dots on it. But because we've imported chloride products for fertilizer, for dust suppressants, for de-icing, it's now in your water. And those yellow dots, the light green and yellow, you're over the limit already. So it's a one-way street with chloride. Just an example from Madison, Wisconsin. This is their municipal wells in a 50-year snapshot and the chloride growth. So their biggest pink dot here, 5 years ago, that services the university campus. They're looking for a new water source, looking at 8-9 million to try to find it. And of course, all their wells are growing in chloride. And so are all your wells, right? Wherever you have high density of parking lot roads, sidewalks, and winter, we're using salt, and this is happening. I'm sure you're familiar with the infrastructure problems and salt use. We did a study 10 years ago that showed for every ton of salt you applied, you get somewhere between $800 and $3,000 worth of infrastructure damage. Well, if you adjust those numbers for inflation, because everything costs a lot more today than it did 10 years ago, I don't know what, you double, triple, maybe put a 0 after these numbers. So it's very expensive long-term to use salt. It ruins our soils, our vegetation. So I don't think that's a new concept to you. This is Minnesota's mass balance of when chloride is imported into Minnesota, how's it used? And our biggest use is de-icing salt. But in the wastewater piece of the pie, that's water softening salt. And then we have fertilizer salt. So for each of your communities, I would highly recommend you do a mass balance and you understand the chloride import into your community What are the biggest sources, and put together a plan, right? It's a non-reversible pollutant. So don't be fooled by this one. Now, in Minnesota, we spend over $100 million a year purchasing rock salt for our city, county, and state highways for one winter. That is a heck of a lot of money. And it's for temporary traction. And at the cost of permanent water pollution, huge infrastructure damage, and on and on and on. We need to find a way to get on top of this problem. Now, Minnesota released a chloride management plan in 2021. First state in the United States to do this. And this is a statewide plan. It asks every person in Minnesota to use less salt. We cannot survive our salt use. Iowa doesn't have this plan yet. One would only suspect it's coming. It should be coming. This is voluntary to follow. It's in a 10-year review cycle. In 2031, will the state of Minnesota say, hey, we're doing a good job, still voluntary? Or will they say, hey, we got to do something more serious? You could make a chloride management plan for your community. I think it'd be very wise. So I've spent a lifetime working in the middle of this triangle in efficient winter maintenance, and we've made some really good progress, but they cannot solve the problem alone. We got to look up the food chain here to infrastructure design, and we got to think of a smarter way. So now that I'm in Bolton and Mank, and I'm in this, in the company of all the people that design these things, I'm bending their ear. I'm like, okay, let's do it different. And so we've launched something called low salt design. The low salt design is one branch of low salt solutions. It's the first one that I've developed. And what I did is I've developed a lot of training programs for the state of Minnesota. I developed a similar one for Bolton and Mink on low salt design and a half-day class. I think we brought in about 200 of our lead designers through it, and they had to pass a test to say they understood. So I've actually created 10 areas of thought. We kind of combined them into 8 that we use on our plan sheets, but these are basic concepts that I want all the designers consider when they're doing their work. And basically what I ask them to do is put your ski boots on your desk, put some snowflakes on your desk, put your snow shovel on your desk, and think about winter when you're designing. Do not design for summer. I mean, you have to, but design for winter too. So I'm going to just give you a few little examples of what we're thinking about. One is use the sun, okay? All of you know if you have a south-facing driveway, it's a breeze in the winter. And if you have a north-facing driveway, it's not. It's that simple. So what we want you to do is think about in design, how do we get our critical areas, our crosswalks, our front steps, our braking zones in the sun? Can we? Oh, here's an example of something we actually did design. Here's an apartment building or something on the south side. The sun in the winter will create a shade, right? All of these areas will be shaded, difficult to maintain, icy, and require a lot of effort and risk. So what if we just reversed it, right? Do we have the option? Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. Just reverse the parking lot, the building, and then we put our underground parking driveway in the sun, the front steps in the sun, the sidewalk. Winter maintenance is a breeze. So whenever we can take advantage of it, we should. This is more for you, the roadway people. One of the things I've noticed from winter maintenance people, it's very slippery under the bridges and underpasses and tunnels because they don't ever get sun. And when we build our bridges, we like to keep them as short as we can to reduce the build cost. And when we keep our bridges as short as possible, we have to move the low spot of the road under them. So everybody knows water runs downhill, right? So if we're directing our water to the low spot and to the shade spot, we got the double whammy in the winter. I would say we should at least consider, how do we get the salt out from underneath the bridge? We do not want to salt under our bridge. We don't want to erode the most expensive piece of our design. So if we move the low spot into the sun, move it out from under the bridge, I think we get better winter performance and extend the life of our bridge. Something to consider. A vegetation, this is just a pretty easy example, but what kind of shadows are we getting by our vegetation placement? If we have the pine tree on the south side of the building and the sun casts the shadow onto the front steps, that's a problem. If we planted an oak tree, it's not such a problem. If we planted, some little blue stem or something, it's not a problem at all. Or if we planted the tree on the other side of the sidewalk. It's not just trees, it's retaining walls, it's anything, right? But shadow casting is a really important thing to pay attention to for winter performance. I'm talking real fast, you guys, I'm sorry. I know we just got a tiny slot this morning, so bear with me. I'm also saying we're going to pay attention to the winter winds. We are going to know the prevailing winter wind direction, which you can kind of see on these blue arrows. And we're going to look at the frequency of the winter wind when it's strong enough to move the snow. So on this map, the darkest orange have the most days or most hours that have that strong wind, and the light yellow has the fewest hours that have that strong wind. So if I was having a conflict in my design, should I use the sun or outsmart the wind? It's really important to look at how big of a factor the wind might be and how important it might be to do something about it, right? So right now in our CAD systems, and I'm so proud of this, we have the sun, a picture of the sun, and we have our designers look up and put in the direction of the winter wind for every site they design. So we've brought our design platform outdoors essentially, right? It's right there, those elements to help remind them. So it looks like Des Moines has an average annual 127 hours where your wind gusts enough to move your snow. So what can you do? Well, you can put up snow fences of a million different types to help. Certainly, you probably do that. You can also do drift-free road and bridge design or ditch design that changes the geometry a little bit of the road and the ditch so that we don't even need these kind of fences. At a site design, does it help the designer to see the angle the winter wind is coming into their design? I think it does, because here is something we designed. We looked at this, it's going to shade the parking lot, the front steps, and look at what's going to happen when the wind blows. Like, don't rent an apartment here. Yeah, that's what I'd say. But if the designer is just looking at a flat, design environment, would they ever think about it? Probably not. All right, a few other things just to kind of get you curious is the meltwater footprint. You guys have no design requirements, I'm sure, for new developments, for new highway, or any kind of renovation to reduce the meltwater footprint. But in Des Moines, it looks like you get about 66 cycles where it's frozen, then it thaws, and it refreezes. Every single one of those, as long as there's snow on the ground, creates the situation, and it creates another round of salting. So we got to reduce the meltwater footprint. When we plow our sidewalk or our road, we never want the snow to get back on it. That should be a requirement, okay? And if it does get back on it, this image on the left shows an acceptable way, right? Yes, it's on our pavement, but it's not any place where anybody's gonna apply their brakes or walk. So we aren't gonna go salt that. And for any of you designers out there, you have to spend a day in jail if you put the handicap spot at the storm drain. That's the most dangerous parking spot in the parking lot. So like, maybe that could be a city ordinance. 1 day in jail if you design this. Now, if you can't reduce your meltwater footprint, I think you can, but in case you can't, at least direct it away from the critical area where we apply brakes and where we have high pedestrian traffic, okay? We can anticipate these areas and we can design to avoid them. All the snowplow drivers know where they apply the most salt. These are the critical areas, the braking areas, the hills, the curves, the front steps, the crosswalks, and so on. This is brand new. You're the first people to see it. We're also trying to look at pavement reduction strategies. Every inch of less pavement equals every inch of less salt, right? So the whole idea of the road diet to reduce the amount of hard surface and still give you functionality, we just added in the benefits for winter, right? When you think of sustainable initiatives, we never talk about winter. We only talk about green roofs, rain barrels, rain gardens, green step cities. We don't have anything white in there. So think about your sustainable initiatives and if it has a winter component, okay? If it doesn't, add it in. And we just added it into our road diet. And here I just circled, less pavement is less salt. So I don't know. I just feel proud to add winter back into our thinking across the board. So my encouragement to you today is we can design better for winter. We have so many benefits, especially as we reduce the need for that salt on this temporary traction. And we have so many good reasons, right? Our water, our soils, our plants, our infrastructure, and the future generations living in your communities, right? So I'm just going to leave you with this little bit of a haunting picture. I was out with the city of Bloomington, Minnesota, looking at their problem areas in winter maintenance. And this jogger comes jogging up from behind us. We're standing in this kind of water puddle area. And we were wondering, would the jogger turn around because they see the icy sidewalk? Would the jogger run on the icy sidewalk or would the jogger run in the street? So the jogger decided to run in the street. And then we had this discussion, whose fault is that? Did winter maintenance do a bad job because they didn't put a bunch of salt on there? Did the designers do a bad job because they didn't flatten that slope and remove the trees? How about the planners? Why did we plan our sidewalk network to go on the shaded slopes, right? Or maybe it's a policy problem. Our city needs a policy that we're closing the sidewalks in the winter. Or, you know, we want all of our residents to stay inside and watch TV, don't go out on the sidewalks, or whatever. I don't know. It's very complicated. No one department is going to solve this. But we all need to think about it. I would bring this image in front of all the departments and say, what are we going to do to keep the jogger out of the road, right? So that is what I have for you. Hopefully I stirred up some thinking. And if I can find a way to unshare my screen here, then let's see, how do I do that? Anybody know? Then I can see your questions.
Well, MPO team and Connie are switching the screen over. Are they? Thank you so much, Connie. That's an awesome presentation and definitely a good perspective. I think we can all think of way too many locations, especially brought up some of the critical locations and crosswalks. We tend to naturally put the storm intakes right there, and I can think of a lot of scenarios, unfortunately, in my own city where there's huge, of course, the storm intakes get plugged with snow, and then there's huge puddles and ice right at the crosswalk. So definitely a great perspective. Is there any questions for Connie from our committee here?
You know, I'm trying to figure out how I get out of this. Can you guys take control back?
Connie, this is Gunner. I can attempt to do that. Meanwhile, I'll suggest that you look at your Zoom window, wherever you're seeing all the other people on the call. There should be a
Yeah.
ribbon toward the bottom. There's a share screen button, and you want to unclick the share screen button.
Yeah, I have lost that. All I see is my little window with our people's heads in it right now. I'm sorry about that, you guys. I don't know how to. Oh, you
There you
did
go.
it.
There you
Yay.
go. I just kicked you out as host. So
Fabulous. So I'd love to hear what your thoughts are as we kind of bring winter into this discussion, and love to answer your questions. Let's see if I can find the chat. Here we go. Yeah. Don't be bashful.
Yeah, any questions for Connie? Connie, I'm not hearing any questions. But I see Connie has put her contact information. Connie's with Bolton and Mink, and she's put her phone number 612-220-5999, and also put her email connie.fortin@bolton-mink.com. So if anyone has any follow-up questions, I know maybe with our weather today here in Des Moines, it's I think it's 74 and sunny. We're having it's hard to fathom, but certainly the prevailing winds have been beating down on us for the past few weeks, that's for sure. But all right, well,
Connie, if you share your slide decks with us, we'll be sure to publish those on our website so our members have access to them.
Yeah, let me just check to make sure that's okay with my company. I'm not sure what their policy is on that, but who should I share them with if it's okay?
Connie, you have my email. You can send them to me. This is Zach.
Zach? Okay, Zach. Yeah, and I would just also say to you all, if there's some conferences or events in Iowa where you think that it would benefit to talk about these concepts, especially the chloride problem, I think would be really important for you all to put it on the agenda, put it on your own community agenda, and make sure that you see the problem. Don't hide it under the rug, because it's just a nasty one.
great. Well, thank you so much, Connie. I appreciate a great presentation. So thank you so much.
Yep, bye-bye.
Thanks. All right, that brings us to item 5. We have a report and a vote on the fiscal year 2024 Unified Planning Work Program and the budget final draft. Dylan, are you able to take this one?
Yes, I'll take this one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Back in March, you approved the draft work program and budget. We submitted that onto the Iowa DOT, and just as a quick refresher, the work program is one of those annual things we have to do that documents everything that we're going to be using our federal funds on, local assessments on, and just kind of our scope of work for the next fiscal year. If you go to the next slide, we touch base here real quick here. There are certain requirements that MPOs are expected to do, such as the long-range plan, the TIP, administer SDBG funds, and so forth. I won't spend a lot of time on this because we talk about this every year. If you have questions on any MPO requirements, though, please let me know. If you go to the next slide, though, we identified in the work program some of the not newer notable projects that we do. A lot of things we do, we kind of repeat every year, but we do like to call out those projects that are more unique to each fiscal year. So beginning in the next fiscal year, we've already started on this a little bit, but we'll have a long-range transportation plan update. And that plan update is due in November of 24. So some things we'll be working on this coming fiscal year, in more particular, our travel demand model growth scenario, working on our planning area boundary, starting to solicit projects as well. We also have the Safe Streets for All grant, where we'll be doing a comprehensive safety action plan. As you remember, last month, we submitted an RFP that's out right now. So over here, the next couple of months, we'll get a consultant on board, and a lot of that work will take place in fiscal year 24. We've had some discussions with a few member communities on doing a goods movement study. That would just look at how freight moves around our region, what improvements need to happen. So we'll continue to work on that. We've done some more work with greenhouse gas analysis and air quality, carbon reduction, and those kinds of things. And then just through the infrastructure bill, there's new funding programs, there's more innovative transportation funding programs out there, and we'll be working to take a better look at that to see what is applicable here in our metro region. If you go to the next slide, and this was in the agenda packet as well, just a quick summary of the things that have changed from the draft version that you approved last month. The DOT just had a couple very minor comments to us, and they were really recommendations. They weren't requirements, but we added them in anyway. One was a discussion of the federal highway and federal transit emphasis areas. Every couple of years, the US DOT comes out with their emphasis areas for planning. Those include things like Justice 40, which was the new environmental justice type of analysis, transportation data in the planning process, complete streets. There's a number of them, and those are now, there's a section in the work program now that discusses that. And then we identified any of the projects that we included in the work program that address those areas. They also asked for a little more detail in the complete streets section. Just in case we haven't really discussed this with the infrastructure bill, part of the funding that we receive as an MPO, the planning funds, have to be used on complete streets, and it's like 2.5% of the funding. So that has to be separated out special. So there was a few things. This was the first year we had to do that, so that's related to that part there. And then they just wanted to note that the Safe Streets for All funds that we get is a separate agreement with the US DOT. It's not part of the traditional Iowa DOT agreement. If you weren't aware, we've had a relationship over the last several years with first Polk County Soil and Water and now Polk County to do watershed management activities. That contract is ceasing at the end of the fiscal year, so we took that out of the draft work program. There's been some changes to the MIPA contract, or there will be changes to the MIPA contract that we reflected. There's a few budgetary things that changed as well. So those are really the changes that have been made from the draft, pretty minor stuff, a lot of budget related type things. I would note that the budget side of things that you received will be drastically different than what the Executive and Policy Committee sees, just because of some of the things that Steve mentioned at the beginning of the transition with leadership. There's some costs associated with that. So those have to be put into the final budget as well. But otherwise, this is what we have for you. I'm happy to take any questions or suggestions. Otherwise, we'd ask for your recommendation to move this on up the chain to the Exec and Policy Committees. If there's any questions, happy to take those.
Thanks, Dylan. Any questions for Dylan? Okay, I'd like to ask for a motion and a second, please, to approve.
Casper moved.
Thanks, Rudy.
Second.
Thanks, Mark. Yep. All right, we got a motion and a second. Any discussion, please? Okay, anyone opposed, please? Okay, hearing none, we'll consider that motion approved. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dylan. All right, that brings us to next item, which is a report on the federal fiscal year 2024 to 2027 Transportation Improvement Program development. I know Zach has sent out a couple emails on this. Zach, are you able to talk to this one, please?
Yes, thank you. Just wanted to give you a quick update on where we're at with the development of the 2024 through 2027 TIP. Staff has been working on this. Currently, we're trying to focus on getting all the projects in TPMS updated. So we originally sent out status reports back in the middle of March or so, requesting that you take a look at your status reports and update those projects. Attached to the email reminder for this meeting today was a list of projects from TPMS. So this includes those of you who have had a chance to submit your status reports. We've made those updates in TPMS, so that document that was set out yesterday has those changes in it. There is a column around the middle or so of that document that says approval level. So if it says submitted on your project and that, it means that we got your status report and we updated those projects. If it still says in prep, it means we just you haven't had a chance to submit that status report yet. So we're still waiting to receive that so we can make changes to those projects. So what I would request today is that if you submitted your status report, please take a look at this project list and make sure that the updates were made correctly and that everything looks right. You know, pay a special attention to making sure that we have your project programmed in the year that you want it programmed, and the amounts are correct. If you haven't had a chance to submit your status report yet, please do so as soon as possible so that we can make the changes that you want to your projects and get those incorporated into the tip. I would note that the list of projects that was sent out yesterday is organized by program type. So TAP funding or STBG funding, CMAQ funding, that's how it's listed. So you will have to kind of look through there to find your projects. I apologize, I couldn't find a way to get those to you know, break out by city, so it would be a little bit easier for you to look at them. But appreciate you taking a look at it and letting us know if there's any additional changes that you need to be made, or like I mentioned, get your status reports in if you haven't had a chance to do that yet. Otherwise, we'll continue to work on the document to get it drafted and ready to go to submit in June. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Thanks, Zach. Are there any questions for Zach, please? All right, thank you, Zach. Please take a look at that email. And like I said, June is a few weeks away. So, hey, so please take a look at that. All right, that brings us to the next item, please. This is a report on the Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Discretionary Grant Program. Allison, are you available to talk to this one, please?
Yep, thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
So I won't, you've seen this slide many times before, but just a reminder, the Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Grant is open now. Eligible fuels go from electric all the way down to propane. There are two different grant options within this program. One is the community charging, the other is the alternative fuel corridor. Alternative fuel corridor is just a reminder in the Des Moines Metro are really our 80 and 35. 235 is not an alternative fuel corridor. And this is an 80-20 match with, of course, applications due at the end of this month. So one of the things we are focusing on now, and you can go to the next slide whenever you're ready, is doing a regional joint application for the community charging program side of this. Just a reminder, this is the first of 5 years, so it's not get everything done right now, but this is kind of our first step in this direction. And MPO staff has been working with both SERPTA and the Ames MPO on coordinating this as well, just because the application really leans towards creating urban, rural, and suburban connections. And so potentially creating kind of a spoken wheel of level 2 chargers. So all of our MPO communities have been contacted. And as of right now, I have 10 for sure. Working on sites with potential up to 13 or 14 different communities. So if your community is working on this and hasn't contacted me, please do so. One of the next steps that's going on right now is once we have these sites identified, is working with Mid-American to identify any utility extension costs, and then taking the proposal for the grant, which does have that 20% match, to make councils for a resolution to be provided back to us. And on the right there, you can see that we have an online mapping tool, which once I get done talking, I'll toss that up in the link. I'll toss it into the chat as well, so you all have a link. But we're building this out not only to start kind of seeing the landscape and the coverage and things like that, but we'll also use this map in the application itself when we submit on the 30th. So as cities start to finalize their locations, go through council and things like that, I would ask that they return any site selections and proposals and all the kit and caboodle there to me as soon as possible. I know that most of the cities right now are looking at this week of May 14th I believe, to have council meetings for those resolutions. And so I would just ask that you get those back to me as soon as you can after those meetings. And just to also add there, if you'd like MPO staff on hand for any of those council meetings to answer any questions, please feel free to reach out to myself or others on staff and we can make that happen. Two things that have come up for questions across the whole region that I wanted to bring to you all today for the grant application and kind of moving forward is two things. So one is procurement. So we don't have to have a detailed plan about how we want to do procurement, but CFI is running with the NEVI, so the National EV Infrastructure Guidelines. And so they are asking for at least a high level procurement plan. And so a lot of cities have been asking what we want to do here. And so I would like to pose it to you all as our member communities to see if there's any sway either way, whether we did like a bulk buy of chargers or whether cities would like to purchase their own individual through the company that they would like to choose. I would take any suggestions there. And then the other piece that I'll just toss out there, just so we don't have to come back to it, is so this one of the questions that I've been getting is, if we are not fully funded for this grant application, how would we parse up the funding that we did receive? And so that is something for the region to consider. You know, that could be based on population, it could be based on a priority list we kind of come up with, but at this point, I'd like to take any of the Transportation Technical Committee's feedback on this and then circle that back to the key staff that I've been working with, so then we can also filter that into the grant application. So I'm happy to take any feedback, questions, anything like that you might have at this time.
Okay, any questions or comments from the committee? Some of the questions out there, bulk versus individual charger. I guess I'm not sure if there's a benefit to having a uniformity in the types of chargers we have out there.
Yeah, there's pros and cons to both sides, right? If we did kind of a bulk, you know, we're kind of putting eggs in one basket. And so, you know, if we don't like that charger, you know, then it's blanketed across, where it could get kind of messy as well if everybody kind of goes out on their own. So if there's no feedback, I'll continue to work with those key staff and see what they have to say and then bring that back to our executive and policy committee later this month.
I guess, Steve, I guess a couple of questions I have is that will this effort look at more of to develop a consistent plan of implementation of charging stations and where they might be sited, whether on street or off street?
So MPO staff hasn't taken that. We've really been letting the cities kind of decide where they would want to put these. And each city has really been coming around to community centers, city halls, public works, public libraries, just because of the public land component piece of this. However, that is something we can do, but we would obviously want this group as well as other groups to help kind of define that. But I do think, you know, since this is the first of 5 years, that's a good direction to go in. And the other piece of that could also be what private entities we could work with as well. This community charging piece does allow for private land installations. However, there are numerous agreements that need to be signed, and in this quick turnaround of this cycle, we're just not able to complete that. So I think that, yeah, John, that is kind of a next step. I don't know if it'll look like a plan, but that is on our radar moving forward. So.
Yeah, I think it's to provide a little bit of feedback as far as the chargers. I think at least our limited experience in the city of Des Moines would point that it is desirable to have the same type of chargers or manufacturers from a management standpoint. The dashboards that the system that we have provides us opportunities to monitor those in a single application, as opposed to trying to learn multiple applications to manage those, and allows us to message out to the charging stations that principally are in the our garages downtown in mass, or we have so that we can issue messages or other information to those that subscribe to that the app that allows them to charge or provide the connection. So I think from our standpoint, we would, at this point in time, we would tend to want to stay with the system that we have, or something or similar products from that system. And whether it be bulk or individual purchases, I think obviously there is benefit in bulk, some pricing, but the other costs that we're seeing face is not necessarily the equipment, it is the infrastructure that is necessary to support or power the equipment. And some of our garages are getting to the point where we've got all that we can put in, because the electrical systems there were not designed for that type of usage.
Yeah, noted. And that's why we're bringing Mid-American straight to the table to kind of see what those capacity pieces are, especially for extension. John, I don't have my notes on me from the last meeting I have at Des Moines. Can you remind me what app system you guys are using, if you know off the top of your head?
We use ChargePoint.
Good, that's what I thought, but just want to double check.
Yeah, I think that the other component that would be interesting is to find out, as far as allow municipalities, as I understand it, can charge for power, and how that might look, and if looking at from a consistency standpoint across the metro.
Yeah, I will note that most of the cities that I've encountered so far, as far as level 2 charging, are a little bit hesitant to ask for payment on that. However, if they were to move up to fast charging, then obviously that becomes a different discussion. But that's a good point. Thank you so much.
And I think with recent legislation, charging, actually getting a fee for charging may be something that we need to do.
I think kind of off that, John has been dealing with, constituents coming to him about the issues of maybe people staying in the charging locations longer than they need to be. And so that's one of the examples of, he's worked with the ChargePoint to issue communications to encourage them to move their vehicles when they're charged. And then also then with that comes the, well, should there be fees to also encourage them to move, so we don't deal with the complaints of people sitting there longer than they need to be, So.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Any other comments, questions?
And I know this is a quiet group, so if you have something for me afterwards, you all have my email. I will put a link to the online map up in the chat, and I did whip up a model resolution that can be edited to whatever you need, and I'll put that in the chat as well. And that will be provided to all your key staff at each of the communities as well.
Okay. Thank you so much, Allison. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Hey, we got another funding topic here. Next item, we've got a state recreation trail funding announcement. Carl, are you available to take that one?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So the Iowa DOT has notified us that the state recreational trail funding is now open. This funding is to establish recreational trails throughout Iowa that are for the public use. These are restricted funds to the acquisition, construction, or the implementation of recreational trails. And at this time, the legislation has not come through on the exact funding numbers. However, the application process is now open, and the deadline to apply is July 1st. So if you have any questions about that, I'm happy to correspond with the DOT, but feel free to reach out to me directly. With that, I'll take any questions, but there's not a lot of information other than what's been provided.
Okay. Thank you, Carl. Any questions for Carl? All right, thanks so much, Carl.
Thanks.
All right, that takes us to the next item, a report on upcoming events. Allison, are you able to take this one, please?
Yep, I can. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
So, one thing that just came up just on my radar yesterday is these top two, the top item here. So May 8th and 11th, the Promote Resilient Operations for Transformative, Efficient, and Cost Savings Transportation, also known as Protect, is having a couple of virtual meetings next week at noon on both May 8th and 11th. I just got this information yesterday. So again, I will throw some things up in the chat and then we'll get them online as well. But just wanted to make you aware of that. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment in our non-action items. But then there's a number of different virtual events. Again, cost benefit analysis is one of the big pieces of a lot of the infrastructure bill and the Inflation Reduction Act programs. And so there is a federal highway how to prepare a benefit cost analysis meeting again later this month. One in-person thing that might be of interest to folks coming up here soon, especially now that it's nicer, is Polk County Water Resources, as well as the Iowa Ag and Water Alliance, are having a field day out at the Tesdell Farm in Slater, Iowa, to celebrate a decade of the nutrient reduction strategy and a lot of the watershed work that's been going on. There will be lunch provided and things like that. If you'd like more information on that, please reach out to myself or John Swanson. With that, the rest of these are in your packet, and I will put the links to the Protect meetings for next week in the chat. Let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Allison. Okay, like I said, Allison's going to put a lot of events there. Allison's going to put those. I was going to start putting those in the chat as we speak here. So pause just for a second here to get some of those.
So the top one is your Protect, and the bottom one is your benefit cost analysis. There you go.
Thank you. And they appear in the chat. Okay. All right, thanks everybody. Thanks, Allison. That brings us to the next item, item 11, other non-action items of interest to the committee. I've got one real quick here. One of the things we've in our meetings with our MPO team, we've been talking about, we've got some really large planning efforts that are going to be ramping up, and with the long range transportation plan and the Safe Streets for All comprehensive safety plan for the MPO here, and we're going to really need feedback on those. And so I just want to give a heads up. This fall, we're looking at scheduling the occasional tech committee meetings will be scheduled in person. And so and that the timing of that will work such with those large planning efforts when we need critical feedback. And so I just wanted to give folks a heads up. If you have any questions, concerns, please reach out to me. Again, those are not scheduled yet at this time, but it would be looking at the fall, perhaps in that, either August, September, or October. One of those meetings, for example, would be in person. We don't know specific yet, but we got to get, as those planning efforts move forward and we look at certain milestones where we need that critical feedback, we would like to bring the meeting in person to get that feedback. So, all right. Are there any other non-action items of interest to the committee?
We've got a couple for you, Steve.
Awesome. Okay.
So, like I mentioned, just yesterday, I got another email that the Protect grant is open. The NOFO is out there, due August 18th. And so that big jumble of words, Protect, really aims at creating resiliency in our transportation system. So we don't have the sea level rise here. However, as we heard before, we do have the winter swings. We do have the flooding, the extreme events and things like that. And so if your community is interested in this program, there will be 2 years of this cycle, 848 million towards it. And again, those links that I just put in the chat are for the virtual meetings next week about that program with Federal Highway. If you have any questions at this time, I'd be happy to take them.
Thank you, Allison. Any questions for Allison? Thank you so much. Any other items of, any other non-action items of interest to the committee?
I have a quick one, Steve.
Yep, awesome.
The MPO is updating its website. This is something that Federal Highway asked us to do or to look at during the last certification. As part of that process, we were updating our digital assets, basically our logo. One of the issues that we have with our current logo is it doesn't scale very well. And so we've developed a new one, had a review with some officers, and we shared this with exec and policy last week, but want to give you a heads up. What I mean by a scalable logo is what you see with a lot of brands that you might recognize, where you can have a large scale logo all the way down to a very small logo that might appear in a browser tab, but all recognizable, all within a kind of family of logos. And so this is what we have come up with, working with the Now group. They're our web developer as well as designers. And so I just want to give everyone a heads up that you're going to start to see this. The transition to the new logo is going to be incremental. You're going to start seeing this on some of the physical assets. And once we launch the website later this spring or summer, we'll update all the digital assets at that time. But just want to give everyone a heads up that you're going to start seeing this.
Excellent. Thank you, Gunnar. Yeah, we had a great experience with Now on a similar effort. So that's awesome.
Yeah, they did your parking, didn't they?
Yep.
Yeah, they're great.
Yeah. Excellent. Any questions for Gunnar? All right. Thanks so much, Gunnar. Thank you. Any other items, please? Okay. All right. So that brings us to our next meeting date will be June 1st. And that's June 1st at 9:30. So that being said, we will consider this meeting adjourned. Thanks everyone, and hope everyone can find a reason to get outside today. So everyone have a great day. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Okay.